Hi everyone, welcome back to Numinosophy Academy. I'm Lewis. So I've discovered another Mormon apologetics YouTube channel. This one is called Evidence Central. It has a number of the same people on it that appear on Saints Unscripted. So this channel probably receives funding from Central Command as well. I'm going to be reacting to a video on the creation of the Book of Mormon, specifically around issues of translation. I think when it comes to the creation of the Book of Mormon, often apologists for the church will fall back on kind of God of the Gaps type arguments. So the kind of classic God of the Gaps argument in my mind relates to creationism, six-day creationism. Look at the world around you, look how beautiful it is, look how complex it is. That couldn't have possibly just arisen through, a natural process of evolution. Therefore, God must have done it. And it's very similar what they do around the Book of Mormon. So, Joseph Smith is too dumb, he's not an educated person, he's basically illiterate, and there's a very, very short period of time in which the book could have been created, and the book is so amazing. There's, so many different people in it, so many different ideas in it, therefore it must be God. So in order to challenge that assumption, you need to be able to show that the equation that these apologists are kind of setting up to suggest that it must be God is dubious to begin with. And if only we can unpick that initial equation, we can show that it's not as unbelievable as it may at first sound or may at first appear, when it comes to like the creation of the earth, for instance. Okay, so we will get straight into this video. It's titled Evidences of the Book of Mormon, Translation, and we will begin.
The popular TV show South Park has an episode titled All About Mormons, in which Joseph Smith's account of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon is mocked as absurd and completely unbelievable. For many people, Joseph Smith's claims are just too ridiculous, and the South Park episode effectively captures this incredulous attitude. But what is the actual history of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon? And is there evidence that supports Joseph Smith's claim that the book is an authentic translation? As Joseph Smith explained, in September 1823, an angel named Moroni appeared to him and told him about an ancient record written on plates of gold and buried in a hill near the Smith family farm in Manchester, New York.
Okay, so the angel Moroni appearing in Joseph Smith's bedroom and telling him about the golden plates. We're getting this story from Joseph Smith, as it said. The trouble is, this account, this idea that Moroni is appearing to Joseph Smith, he doesn't tell that until much later, suggesting that it was created later and, plugged back into the story, plugged back into Joseph Smith's own history. And that happens a number of times throughout the various accounts, his various accounts of the first vision, for instance, or the various ways he tells the story of his early years. You see, as his understanding increases, as his theology develops, and he moves from the kind of theology we see expressed in the Book of Mormon to the kind of theology which develops over the course of the Doctrine and Covenants, he goes back and he doctors his early years, the accounts of his early years, in order to account for those later theological developments. And there's nothing actually unique about religions doing that kind of thing. And so take the New Testament, we have there being a process of theological development concerning the question, who is Jesus? Is he a divine figure? Is he the Messiah? Is he God? And the Gospels kind of disagree a little bit about that. John is the most explicit that he is a divine individual. The other Gospels suggest more that he's a Messiah. But in order to kind of prop up the significance of Jesus, they go back and create the birth narratives about, the star moving through the sky and the wise men traveling to, see the new Messiah being born, etc., etc., etc. That's not historical. That is a kind of created theological account to give credence to the figure of Jesus, that he represents the messenger of God. And Joseph Smith very much does the same thing. The angel Moroni did not appear to him in 1823. However, in saying that, he was thinking about the golden plates in 1823. So why, did Joseph Smith have this idea about the golden plates? He was a treasure seeker, and I know this video goes into that a little bit later on, but the idea was that he would claim that there's treasure in various places, in fields, on hills, and so forth, and he would channel through a seer stone information about where that treasure is. And then he would lead out, he'd be paid for this, he would lead out a load of diggers to a particular spot, and they would attempt to dig up the treasure. And then Joseph Smith would, kind of construct a narrative around, there's a spirit that's guarding the treasure, and we have to be faithful, otherwise we won't get the treasure. We're digging, and oh no, the spirit has moved the treasure, and it slid through the earth. And one of the treasures was this golden plate. So this was a kind of recurring narrative for Joseph Smith, the idea that there was these golden plates in the hill near his house that he would ultimately be able to acquire for himself. But more significantly, he used the idea of these golden plates to channel certain stories that he would tell. So, it's not like today. At the end of the day, we watch some YouTube videos, or we sit down and we watch a show on Netflix. Well, in the 19th century, you didn't have anything like that. The kind of common piece of entertainment was listening to one another tell stories. And the kind of stories that Joseph Smith would tell, were often very linked to religion, because, people are very religious, and they're very linked to the kind of mythology surrounding the Native Americans. And he's in a household where there's a lot of theological disagreement. His father and his mother both had different Christian ideas. Joseph Smith's father was a Universalist and a Unitarian, and Joseph Smith's mother was a Presbyterian. So there was a lot of, heated theological debate. I think it probably caused a lot of, family anxiety, and, it created a lot of conflict within the household. And so in order to kind of calm that conflict down and resolve some of that conflict, what Joseph Smith would do is he would channel the words from these golden plates, and he would tell stories from that source that would, in effect, resolve some of these theological disagreements in order that there could be greater harmony within the household. Because Joseph Smith, ultimately, he just hated that kind of religious disagreement and religious argument. And the beauty of these golden plates is that they offered a way for Joseph Smith to kind of give the final word on issues and to some degree settle disagreement. So, no angel Moroni.
Joseph said that the next day, Moroni led him to the hill and showed him the gold plates, along with translation instruments he described as being 2 stones and silver bows. But Joseph wasn't permitted to take the plates or the translation instruments for another 4 years. And so
it's my belief that obviously the reason Joseph Smith was not permitted in 1823 to take the golden plates is because there were no golden plates, really. And this is just part of the kind of mythology that Joseph Smith is creating. And this is, according to kind of the historian Dan Vogel, by 1828, when he does claim to actually recover the plates, and you have the eyewitness testimony of people that claim to have seen the plates, he created fake plates. And that is nowhere near as difficult as you might imagine. Because basically what he's doing is he's getting sheet metal, the kind of sheet metal that you would have been able to find anywhere in 19th century America, the kind of sheet metal that was used to, make roofs or create buckets or whatever. And he just stacked them all up and then stuck a spike through them all. And that would serve as the golden plates. They're basically made out of bronze, not gold. And how do you account for the fact that you have all these all this testimony from eyewitnesses? Well, if you look at what is claimed, they never actually saw with their own literal eyes the plates. What Joseph Smith did is he covered the plates with cloth, and he would allow people to kind of feel the plates under the cloth, and they would then see them with their spiritual eyes. And that is how, Joseph Smith was able to trick people, essentially, into believing that he really did have the plates, including, he also was able to trick in this way those that translated the book, Oliver Cowdery, Emma Smith, Martin Harris.
So, in the spring and summer of 1828, Joseph, with Martin Harris and his wife Emma working as his scribes, began the translation of the Book of Mormon. Those involved with the translation of the Book of Mormon said that Joseph initially used the stones found with the plates. Those stones were later described as spectacles, or the Urim and Thummim, and in the Book of Mormon they are simply called interpreters. At some point, however, Joseph began translating with another seer stone he had used in money digging and folk magic practices during his youth. Be sure to check out the link to the church's Gospel Topics essay that explains Joseph's use of the seer stones if you're interested or unfamiliar with this topic.
Okay, so the way that worked is that Joseph Smith would use the seer stone, because the seer stones were what he used to find treasure. So they were considered very powerful magical objects, and they kind of legitimized Joseph Smith and his ability to achieve magical feats, such as finding treasure, such as translating the Book of Mormon. So he would take these seer stones, he would put them in a hat, and then he'd put the hat up to his face, and he would dictate what the translation, supposedly, of the Book of Mormon was. So during the translation, he's not looking at the Book of Mormon, right? The bronze plates are, in a box over on the other side of the room, or not in the room at all. But he's kind of channeling the words of the plates, allegedly, and he's speaking them out. And then whoever is scribing at that point, Oliver Cowdery, is writing down what is said. So the question that raises is, how could Joseph Smith have possibly done that? Did he cheat in some way? Maybe he had paper in his hat. Maybe he had notes, etc., etc. But you don't need to assume anything like that. You don't have to assume any kind of hoax. Is it possible that Joseph Smith could have just told from his own head an elaborate story over the course of, a month or a month and a half or 2 months that became the Book of Mormon? Yes, that is possible. It's difficult for us to imagine that today because, we tend to have kind of low attention spans. But this is what Joseph Smith had been doing his whole life. Remember, I told you, he's in front of the fire when he's younger. He's telling these stories. He's channeling the golden plates. So he's already done some kind of dry runs. He is well rehearsed in the art of telling stories with, theological resonance that are resolving particular theological problems. He's used to doing that. And this is just that, amped up several degrees, which is to say Joseph Smith is creatively very impressive, very intelligent. He's definitely not the doofus that some Mormon apologists want to claim him to be. He is a very accomplished storyteller, as, many men and women in 19th century rural America were. And he's channeling that gift in creating the Book of Mormon.
Although it's not always clear which translation instrument he was using and when, the eyewitnesses described how Joseph would place the seer stone in a hat and press his face into the brim of the hat to shield out external light. He would then read off words to his scribe as they appeared in the stone. Although this sounds odd,
So yeah, the only part there that I don't think is happening is I don't think the words are really appearing on the stone. That's just part of the mythological narrative that Joseph Smith is creating in order to explain the process. But really what's happening is he's just kind of giving the illusion that something magical is happening. So the onlooker, thinks there's some kind of miraculous event taking place, but really he's just using that as a kind of distraction while he just recounts the story. So it doesn't require there to be any plagiarism, any notes, anything like that. The only plagiarism I think that happens in the Book of Mormon is from the King James Version, the King James Bible itself. And I think it's well attested that the King James Version was just there at some of the points when the Book of Mormon was being written. And so you get like large sections from Isaiah, which are literally just copied out from the Bible. Other than that, I don't think there's any direct plagiarism taking place. There is just a combination of the kind of ideas which were circulating in 19th century rural America, ideas around the Native Americans, around the mound building culture, ideas around there being a white race that once inhabited America, the idea that that there's a link between the Hebrew nations and the Native Americans, that the Native Americans represent the 10th tribe of Israel, etc., etc., etc. All these ideas were circulating in 19th century rural America, and they just would have been kind of in the air, in the what people were talking about. So Joseph Smith would have been aware of all these ideas, which is why they all find their way into the Book of Mormon.
It does strengthen the claim that Joseph did not personally write the Book of Mormon, as he could not use reference materials of any kind in such a position. It's crucial to understand that the eyewitnesses involved in the production of the Book of Mormon all firmly maintained that Joseph was not reading from any book or manuscript, but instead dictated the text to his scribe as it was revealed to him in the translation instruments.
Yeah, I think that is what happened. I believe the eyewitnesses when they say that there was no cheating that went on, that it really is just Joseph Smith telling this story, and the scribes are taking it down.
The translation was then completed in June 1829, a copyright for the Book of Mormon having been secured on June 11th. What's so remarkable about this part of the translation of the Book of Mormon is the breakneck pace of the work. The translation of the text during this time was completed in an astounding 65 to 72 working days.
So the question arises, is it possible that the Book of Mormon could have been written in this short period of time? 65 days, 72 days. I've heard someone else say something like 90 days. But, whatever, you have a contained short period of time in which this thing was written. Is that possible? Yeah, I think it is possible. Remember, what's happening is the story is being told and dictation is being taken down. So how much, speaking is required a day in order to produce the entire Book of Mormon? Because we're told that, during the time when it's like Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery working together, they're working full days. They're working flat out. But that amount of time is probably even unnecessary. the amount of words, for example, that I'm speaking right now, would add up to you probably needing about 3 hours worth of content a day over the course of 72 days or 90 days. And that would get you to a complete Book of Mormon manuscript. That even allows time for revisions, for, doing more on some days and maybe nothing at all on other days. So I don't think it's as unbelievable as Mormon apologists want to make out. It's just, a long ass story.
Based on the number of pages in the 1830 edition of the Book of Mormon, that puts the rate of the translation of the Book of Mormon at 7 or 8 pages a day.
Yeah, so I think I heard in an interview in which Stephen King said that he could write about 10 pages a day. And so that's, well within being able to do this. But of course, Stephen King is typing on a keyboard. And so in theory, you could probably go even quicker if you were just, spouting the story out and someone was quickly, taking dictation.
In addition to eyewitness testimony that Joseph and Oliver did not stop to make revisions, the evidence seen in their surviving original manuscript of the Book of Mormon confirms the rapid speed in which the book was translated. The original manuscript shows smooth flowing text and the kinds of mistakes a scribe makes when hearing a rapid dictation. In July and August of 1829, Joseph Smith approached a number of local printers to contract the publication and sale of the Book of Mormon.
So I guess one of the questions that this kind of creates is, what did Joseph Smith believe was happening himself? Did he think he was just orchestrating an elaborate con, or did he believe he was, in some sense, receiving some kind of spiritual guidance and aid? And I think it's more that. Although I think he is fully aware of the fact that he is cheating, that he is lying about how this book is coming forth, I do believe that he, to some degree, believed what he was doing was ordained of God, that the ends would ultimately justify the means. He hates, from his childhood, he hates this kind of theological disagreement. He hates the idea of kind of churches being at war with one another. And he's kind of envisioning this new Jerusalem, this ideal state in which everyone can just live in harmony, in Christian loving harmony with one another. And I think with that as his kind of end goal, he believed that the degree to which what he was doing was a con would ultimately justify that utopia he was leading everyone towards.
Besides printers in nearby Rochester, New York, Joseph also approached the Palmyra publishers Egbert B. Grandin and Jonathan Hadley. On August 11, 1829, Hadley published a short description of his encounter with Joseph Smith in his newspaper, the Palmyra Freeman. Quoting either Joseph himself or someone else associated with the translation, Hadley wrote, "It was said that the leaves of the Book of Mormon were plates of gold, about 8 inches long, 6 wide, and 1/8 of an inch thick, on which were engraved characters or hieroglyphics. By placing the spectacles in a hat and looking into it, Smith could, he said so at least, interpret these characters." In that same account, Hadley sneered that Joseph Smith was very illiterate and his claims fraudulent. However, even if he personally disbelieved Joseph's description of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, Hadley provided a contemporary non-Mormon account of the translation of the Book of Mormon that corroborates the later Mormon accounts very nicely. Eventually, E.B. Grandin agreed to print 5,000 copies of the Book of Mormon for the price of $3,000. And on March 26, 1830, Grandin announced the publication and sale of the Book of Mormon in his newspaper, the Wayne Sentinel. From all of this, a strong case can be made for the authenticity of Joseph Smith's account of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon.
Yeah. I mean, I think everything I've said, gives account for the claims that Joseph Smith makes. You don't have to imagine that there's some conspiracy. You don't have to imagine that all the scribes and Emma are all kind of working together to bring forth this con, you just have to imagine that Joseph Smith is an accomplished storyteller and that he is interested in, rectifying these theological differences and kind of giving everyone a solution to various problems that were being discussed in 19th century America. The Book of Mormon purports to resolve those problems. I don't think anything in that is that problematic. You definitely don't need to assume that all the magical stuff is happening in order to account for the Book of Mormon coming forth.
First, the eyewitness testimony of those directly involved with the translation unanimously agree that Joseph was not copying from another book or manuscript, but rather that he dictated the text of the Book of Mormon as he peered into the seer stone. Second,
as I said, I'm fine with all of that.
Astonishingly rapid pace of the dictation of the text from April to June 1829 can only be described as miraculous, given the Book of Mormon's intricate narrative, its interweaving timelines and chronologies, its profound teachings, and its subtle literary complexity.
So that's an interesting question. Is the Book of Mormon just so complex and so incredible as a literary work that it couldn't have possibly come out of the mind of Joseph Smith? And I don't think that that is the case. I think it is perfectly conceivable that it came out of the mind of a 19th century rural American wrestling with the theological concerns of Christians in 19th century America. It seems to follow very nicely with that assumption. So the kind of things that you see in the Book of Mormon, which, attest to the idea that it's not translation, but just Joseph Smith telling a story, is the way that characters crop up. So he names, new names. It says here 150 unique names. So he comes up with a name, he tells a little story about that person, and then for the most part, they then disappear and they're then not referenced again. Apart from, 2 or 3, kind of primary characters within the Book of Mormon, which are referenced over and over and over again, the vast majority of names are mentioned once and then they don't have to be kept in the memory because, you're moving on chronologically to the next year, the next part in the unfolding Book of Mormon narrative. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything that remarkable. And, according to Dan Vogel as well, the historian, he also says that he doesn't, regard the Book of Mormon as that profound. It's not an incredible piece of literature that couldn't possibly have been written. It could have been.
Third, the evidence uncovered in the original manuscript confirms the testimony given by eyewitnesses. It is
eyewitnesses, as I mentioned earlier. It's a problem to call them eyewitnesses because they're seeing it with their spiritual eyes and they are buying into this kind of magical worldview. The idea of there being treasure in the ground, for instance, that the treasure seeker can locate through spiritual power, and then the spirits can move and they can discern that movement and all that. This is like mainstream believed, right? Everyone just takes for granted that sort of stuff is happening. And, when the golden plates come forth, the assumption is that it's true. It's not, these are not people that think, no, there's no way this is true. And then they see it and they go, oh my God, I really didn't believe you, but there it is. So it's true. And that's not how it happened. They're already believing. And there's a little bit of sleight of hand taking place. I'll touch it under the cloth and it's confirming to them what they already believe to be true.
Clear from the surviving manuscript that Joseph was dictating a text at a rapid pace and did not go back to make any revisions. In addition to all of these, the historical record also indicates that Joseph and his associates were unaware of the contents of the Book of Mormon as they were translating. This makes the dictation of the text all the more remarkable, as it is next to impossible to imagine that Joseph just made up a text as intricate as the Book of Mormon on the fly. Any naturalistic theories explaining the translation would be more plausible if they could argue from the premise that Joseph took a lot of time, had a lot of privacy, was working in the luxury of a setting with diverse resources, and had the freedom to make as many revisions as needed.
Again, as stated, you don't need any of that. The situation as presented offers everything required to bring forth the Book of Mormon.
However, none of this bears out once you look at the actual documented history. Thanks to the painstaking efforts of historians and other scholars, it is safe to say that Joseph Smith's claims are more lucid, straightforward, and based on the best evidence than a silly cartoon would have you believe. The burden of proof to articulate a coherent counter-explanation based on just as compelling historical evidence now rests on skeptics who simply dismiss Joseph Smith's claims out of hand. Taken together, this evidence indicates, as Joseph testified throughout his life, that the Book of Mormon came forth and was translated by the gift and power of God.
Okay, well, there you go. Yes, I think the Book of Mormon did come forth. It came forth out of Joseph Smith's imagination, which doesn't mean that it's not a spiritually significant book. You could still believe that the Book of Mormon is inspired from God and contains spiritual truths even. There's nothing, precluding that. But a historical artifact, a record of historical events, no, it clearly falls horribly short of that hurdle. Anyway, cheers for watching. Thanks in particular to my Patreon supporters. Your help is very much appreciated. Thanks everyone else for watching. Please do like this video, as always, for the YouTube algorithm. If you've gotten this far and you enjoy this content, please do subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss out on future upcoming videos. Cheers again, and I will see you in the next one.